The White House is also speaking out against China's COVID lockdowns, which have caused a massive wave of protests and violence throughout that country. Here's some new video from Shanghai showing hundreds of protesters clashing with police. The White House also released a statement just moments ago. In part, it said, quote, "Everyone has the right to peacefully protest here in the United States and around the world. This includes in the People's Republic of China." You see them holding up those white signs. We'll talk more about that. We also saw COVID response coordinator Dr. Ashish Jha asked about these COVID lockdowns. He says it is a failed policy and not realistic for the American people.
Interesting. And, you know, the uprising is getting worldwide headlines, John, and those white pieces of paper, you know, they are being held by people expressing all their anger with restrictions. They're saying this is a tactic used in part to evade censorship or arrest there, but make their demonstrations and their opinions heard.
Well, the latest wave of protests was triggered by an apartment fire that killed 10 people last week in western China. People there had been on lockdown for as long as 100 days. Some speculate the lockdown measures may have impeded the residents' ability to escape. We talked about this, too. Remember a couple of weeks ago with Gordon on that father who was trying to get his kid to the hospital. Let's check in now with foreign correspondent Patrick Falk. He is in Hong Kong, and he has the latest on the unrest in China.
Well, there have been reports of protests taking place in different parts of the world, including in Canada and Australia, but closer to home here in Hong Kong, there was also a vigil held on Monday evening to commemorate the victims of the apartment fire that took place in Xinjiang province. That is what's triggered this wave of protests spreading across mainland China. Many people believe that COVID curbs delayed rescue efforts, so a lot of people really have latched onto that and come out to voice their grievances over the zero COVID policy. Remember, this has been going on for 3 years now, so people are frankly fed up about it, but they are also coming out to challenge China's leadership, and some people have been chanting for the downfall of the Communist Party and the downfall of President Xi Jinping. They are doing so at great personal risk. There is a likelihood that authorities will move quickly to prevent any further dissent, and there could be a swift crackdown to come in the next few days.
All right, Patrick Falk for us in Hong Kong. Let's welcome in now Gordon Chang. He's the author of The Great U.S.-China Tech War. Gordon, always great to see you.
Hi, Gordon.
Hi.
Some of these protesters, Gordon, have been calling out President Xi by name. Talk to us about what kind of consequences those folks are facing when the government really starts cracking down.
Well, China runs the near total surveillance state, and they have artificial intelligence and somewhere around 600 million surveillance cameras across the country, which means that they can identify almost everybody at those protests. And some of those people are going to be rounded up. I suspect that they're being rounded up at this particular time. But I don't know what good that will do in the long run, because we have seen, because of these spontaneous protests around China, that there is deep-seated resentment, anger, and hatred at not only the COVID rules, but also Xi Jinping himself and the Communist Party. And that means that the sentiments on the streets of China are revolutionary. And this will bubble up from time to time. This is not going away, John and Bianca.
Clearly doesn't look like it. And you talked about the surveillance, how they do know who's on the street. An interesting note in this was a BBC journalist by the name of Ed Lawrence. I'm sure you heard his account. He was detained, beaten, he says, by authorities there. He was finally let go. But the BBC is saying, you know, they do not have an explanation of why their journalist covering these was held. Obviously, do you think this was sent to make a wider message to other journalists that are covering these uprisings, Gordon?
Yes, I think that this is an attempt to intimidate not only journalists, but foreigners in particular. So what we are seeing is this sort of xenophobic mood throughout China. It starts at the top of the Communist Party and it filters down. And so someone like Edward Lawrence would be a target for police. You know, there may not be a direct order from Xi Jinping saying, go get the BBC correspondent, but everybody knows that's what he wants. And that's what's happening at this moment.
Very interesting. And he's tweeting, so he is okay, that reporter. We do want to make note of that. Let's pivot a little. Talk about Taiwan. Gordon, there is a new report from the Wall Street Journal saying that there is a nearly $19 billion backlog of U.S. weapons that were bound for Taiwan. And obviously this is because of some of the support we've given to Ukraine during the war. A quote from the article, though, is saying that this backlog is raising concern that Washington may be running out of time to help defend Taiwan against China adequately because Taiwan, unlike Ukraine, can't effectively be armed after an invasion. Your thoughts on where things stand in this case particularly, and I know you've spoken a lot about the necessity for arms.
Yeah, this is a critical situation. In general, there's been a lot of slow walking by the Pentagon and prior administrations, including the Biden administration, of delivering arms to Taiwan. But it's, of course, been made worse because we don't have enough. And the Chinese can see this. Our support of Ukraine, which is a really important thing for us to do because it helps deter China. But nonetheless, that means that arms that were supposed to go to Taiwan are now in Eastern Europe. And because these protests can go on for quite a long time, because the Communist Party can suppress them and then they'll bubble up, it means that Xi Jinping now has an incentive to create a misadventure abroad in order to distract the Chinese people, to say, look, we have a common enemy. There are foreigners, whether it's Taiwan or the United States, Japan, whatever. So this is going to be, I think, a particularly sensitive and dangerous time for the United States.
Gordon, we wanted to talk a little bit more, too, about politically what's going on in Taiwan. The Democratic Progressive Party, that is the ruling party, which calls for statehood and independence from China. They suffered some pretty big election losses over the weekend. The website Hot Air picks up on this story, and they have this take. They say Taiwan's voters appear to be tired of U.S.-China tensions. The DPP lost to a coalition of Chinese nationalists. That coalition seems to favor Taiwan's reunification with China. Are you concerned about the shift in public opinion there? Tell us what's going on.
Yeah. Tsai Ing-wen, the president, made China relations the centerpiece of local elections. That probably wasn't very smart because in Taiwan, local elections are fought over local issues. But, the KMT, the nationalists, those people, who do want to have unification with the mainland, they don't really have the support to do that because there is a growing consensus in Taiwan that Taiwan is independent. And while they may vote KMT, they do not want to become part of the People's Republic of China. So in that sense, I'm not concerned. But it does show a failure of the Taiwan president to understand these elections in these municipalities.
You know what else it tells us? That even in Taiwan, all elections are local. That's what they say anyway. Gordon Chang, great to see you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Gordon.